We're now going to have a very high level overview of the life cycle of an asset within your organization. I say very high level because we're just going to look at the key stages here. Within those stages, there are going to be processes, work instructions, RACI, maybe even sub life cycle process steps that you need to follow to make sure that you are really utilizing that asset, you are really managing it throughout its life cycle. But for now, let's just look at the key high level parts of hardware's life cycle. So it all starts with the onboarding process. This is typically aimed at net new assets to your organization. So if you haven't built a hardware standard or a hardware model convention, for example, all of your assets need to be onboarded to make sure they fit within your organization, they fit within your environment, they fit within your budget, they're the right specs, that make sure that they do the actions that are required for your users. This relates to all asset types. So for example, I've had questions about, do we really need to onboard monitors, for example? Yes, you do. Believe it or not, there may be, CAD designers within your organizations, graphic designers, and you provide them with a monitor that doesn't show all of the colors correctly. It's not got enough pixels, not the right size. There's more to think about with things like that than you actually realize. So we make sure that we onboard all new hardware models into the organizations that we work with. We make sure then that we add them to like the hardware convention, so that they're all approved, or if they're an exception, we flag that they're an exception just for a specific group of stakeholders or a specific team. We make sure that it's compatible with the software that we've got, especially if it's laptops or desktops or iPads. Other tablets are available, whether it's a tablet or a phone. We make sure that it's all compatible with the inventory tools that we've got as well. So the onboarding is a really big deal, and it makes sure that that model is fit for your organization so that you can kind of avoid any potential problems that come further down the line. Next up, obviously, once we've identified that that's the correct model to buy, we go through the procure. If we don't have any assets already in stock, then obviously we go out and buy them. If we have some in stock, we always make sure that we reuse equipment first. Receive, this is an overlooked one. I really believe that the receive part of a hardware lifecycle is overlooked. When I talk about receive, I'm talking about whether you've got a third party, for example, that manages all of your hardware for you. They image it, they tag it, they create the user profiles, install all the software. If they do that for you, then send it off to you, or even from the hardware vendor or your supplier themselves. There seems to be a disconnect when people receive the equipment. They're not checking it's the right make and model, it's the right spec, it's not dead on arrival. There's a whole like hardware goods received process in there that you can put when doing the receive, making sure that the asset management database is updated with the right location, the right status, the right substate, the right user details. There is a lot that goes into the receive part of the process, and it's very often overlooked. Whenever I see some lifecycle management stuff, I always see receive not being included, missed out, or kind of being just glossed over, when actually it's a really important phase of the lifecycle of an asset. It's essentially that asset coming into your organization, right? So you got to get it right. Once we receive it in, then we've got the deploy process, so how you're shipping it out to your users, whether that's making sure they've got the right software, which has licenses. See, the ham and Sam relationship, it makes sense. Making sure they've got the right licenses, the right license types, that all their drivers are updated, they've got their OneDrive set up, their emails, all that good stuff that just further enhances like the customer service experience with your users. So that deploy also then makes sure again that there's only secondary updates to the asset management database, like location, even if you're managing like desk locations for users, that all follows in the deploy process. We have also seen a lot of organizations since COVID, in fact, make sure that when a user comes to collect a device that they're giving out, that they sign like an asset acceptance form, or that they formally sign the ITAM policy to make sure that they agree to adhering to the ITAM policy or the acceptance forms that's been defined and set out. This is normally done on a PDF basis. It's really cool. It gives you that audit history so that then if someone drops a device or gives it to another user, you can go, whoa, hold on. That's against our ITAM policy that you signed when you got the equipment that the organization's provided to you. So yeah, that's another really important stage of the life cycle. Maintain. This is typically covering off stock management, for example, and also covering off repairs and replacements, which feeds nicely actually into replacements. That again, yeah, if you're doing a hardware refresh, that's in replace. If you're doing a replacement for a broken device, that's in replace. If you have some sort of desktop as a service or hardware asset leasing, in replace. And it all coincides nicely, as you can kind of see all of these areas of the life cycle all relate to each other. They all have a critical part to play, because we've also then got retrieve. Retrieve is one of my favorite parts of the life cycle process, because it normally means we're getting something back that we can do something with, whether that's reprovision, whether that's refresh, or whether that's ITAD, or even repair, which is the less fun one, because typically it's not covered under warranty because it's a very specific issue that you have to pay to repair, whatever. But yeah, retrieve is a really good one, making sure you're getting equipment back. This is also through your internal hardware audits. So if an asset hasn't been used for 30 plus days, for example, that you reclaim that, you put it back into your stock, or you sell it off for ITAD, or you send it off for ITAD if it's outside of your life cycle that you've defined internally. So yeah, another really important one. Again, with all of these elements, there are AMDB updates, asset management database updates that you need to do to make sure that the status is right, in use, in stock, out on loan, pending retirement, in transit, whatever it may be, and also the location and stock rooms. We have a whole session on the asset management database coming up in a few weeks, so that you can really kind of see how important the asset management database is, and why you should be updating it on a regular basis. And then finally, we've got retire. So this is typically when it's reached the end of life, or it's no longer fit for purpose, or it's due for a hardware refresh, or it may just be broken and you physically cannot replace it or repair it anymore. So retire relates to the whole decommissioning. This is a big thing within the infrastructure estate, less so from an end user perspective, but making sure you're decommissioning your infrastructure assets correctly, making sure that they're being wiped correctly, working even with a third partner, normally an IT asset disposition, IT asset disposal partner, to make sure that they're being blancoed. That's typically the tool of choice that I use to make sure that the hard disks, are completely wiped. There's no trace of your organization's data, etc. on there. Then repurposing it, whether that's reselling it out in the second-hand market, whether that's stripping down the components and selling those off, or just making sure that you're getting all of the certifications when disposing of the equipment. Again, something that we'll go to in detail later on. We do mention it briefly in this session, but there's loads of different regulations you need to be aware of when disposing of IT equipment, just to make sure you're following environmental standards, security standards, etc. There's a lot that you need to make sure that your ITAD partner has accreditation for. But that's a very high level basic overview of the life cycle of an asset. And we'll dig down into this in another session, because each one of those, like I said, has sub processes, has full processes as well, sub life cycle elements of it, various nuances that are very specific on an organization by organization basis. But as just a very high level overview, that is what the life cycle of a hardware asset would typically look like for an organization. And this isn't just exclusive to end user stuff. This is for all IT equipment. But like I said, there may be some nuances depending on the kind of IT asset that it is.